The light was perfect. Too perfect. It spilled through the tall windows of the restaurant in soft gold, washing over white tablecloths, crystal glasses, and the faces of people who had never known hunger. Everything gleamed. Everything felt controlled. Even the silence between conversations carried weight, curated, expensive, deliberate. Emily Carter moved through it like a shadow. Her steps made no sound. Her hands carried the tray with mechanical precision, fingers placed exactly where they needed to be, weight balanced without thought. She had learned, slowly and deliberately, how to disappear in places like this, where being noticed meant being measured, and being measured meant being found lacking. Or worse, being found. She set down the water glass without meeting anyone's eyes. "Thank you," someone murmured, already turning away. Emily nodded and stepped back. This was the rhythm she'd mastered. Approach, serve, disappear. No lingering. No personality. No trace. She turned toward the kitchen, her breathing steady. When she felt it, that subtle shift in the air, the kind that happens when someone enters a room and expects it to adjust itself around them. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just presence, the kind that makes waiters straighten and managers force polite smiles. Richard Hale. She didn't need to look. She had felt that energy before, in rooms with no windows, where decisions were made quietly and lives changed without explanation. Her fingers tightened slightly around the empty tray. He moved toward his usual table near the window. His suit was perfectly tailored, charcoal gray, understated. His posture was relaxed in the way only very powerful men managed. Loose, but never careless. Comfort built on decades of never being questioned. He didn't scan the room. The room scanned him. Emily reminded herself to breathe. To keep her face neutral. To remember why she was here, and not there anymore. What survival looked like now. Quiet, small, forgettable. But her body recognized him before her mind allowed it. The way he moved. The economy of his gestures. The kind of man who had learned early that power didn't need to announce itself. Her pulse didn't spike. Training had taught her that. But something deeper stirred, the automatic assessment of exits and movement she'd sworn she'd left behind. She hadn't. The manager appeared beside her, voice low and tense. Table 7. Mr. Hale. He expects perfection. Minimal conversation. Don't make eye contact unless he initiates. Emily met his gaze calmly. Understood. She approached the table, menu in hand, heartbeat steady despite the static under her skin. Control wasn't the absence of fear, it was fear trained to remain still. Richard was reading his phone. One hand rested on the tablecloth, fingers drumming once, then stopping. A gold watch caught the light. He didn't look up. "Good afternoon," Emily said evenly. "May I start you with water?" Still. Room temperature. He didn't lift his eyes. "And the salmon, however the chef recommends it." No please. No acknowledgement. Just instructions delivered to the space she occupied. Emily didn't write anything down. Of course. She turned to leave when his voice stopped her. One moment. She turned back. Richard finally looked up. His gaze lingered for a fraction of a second, not with recognition, but assessment. "The last time I was here," he said calmly, "the salmon was overcooked. Dry. Unacceptable." A pause. "I trust that won't happen today." It wasn't a question. It was a reminder of hierarchy. Emily met his eyes without flinching. "I'll make sure it's perfect." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps. He leaned back slightly. "You're new. 3 months. You don't talk much. You said you preferred minimal conversation." Silence stretched thin between them. "Efficient," he said finally. Emily inclined her head, a gesture that meant nothing, and walked away. Her hands steady, her breathing controlled, her face unreadable. But beneath the discipline, something old stirred. She knew his name. She knew what he'd done. She knew the decision he'd made 4 years ago, the signature that erased her without explanation. And he had no idea who was holding his menu. No idea she once was the person his security team called when situations turned uncontrollable. No idea she still counted exits, still tracked movement, still knew exactly how many seconds it would take to reach the back door. Emily stepped into the kitchen, set the order down, and allowed herself one slow breath. Just one. Then she straightened, smoothed her apron, and returned to the dining room. Invisible again. The question wasn't whether he would remember her. It was whether she could afford to let him forget. The kitchen was loud. Metal clanging against metal. Voices calling out orders. The sharp hiss of something searing on a grill. Heat rolled through the space in heavy waves, thick and oppressive. Emily barely noticed. She'd worked in worse conditions. Places where temperature was a weapon. Where discomfort wasn't a side effect, it was part of the training. She moved to the edge of the kitchen, away from the chaos, and pressed her palms flat against the stainless steel counter. Cool. Solid. Real. Her breathing stayed even. But her mind was already moving. Cataloging. Assessing. Running through scenarios she'd promised herself she'd stopped imagining. 4 years since she'd seen his face anywhere but memory. In dreams that woke her at 3 in the morning, heart pounding, hands already reaching for weapons that no longer existed. 4 years since the meeting she hadn't been allowed to attend, where her name had been spoken in the past tense, where her file had been sealed, her access revoked, her existence erased, cleanly, administratively, without ceremony. She'd never seen the paperwork, but she'd heard his name attached to it. Richard Hale. Consultant. Advisor. The man corporations called when problems needed to disappear quietly. Without headlines. Without investigations, he had made her disappear. And now he sat 15 feet away, waiting for perfectly cooked salmon, irritated by a service error that had nothing to do with her. Carter. Emily turned sharply toward the chef, expression neutral. Table 7. Salmon. Medium rare. Citrus glaze. Seasonal vegetables. Don't let it sit. The plate slid across the pass. The chef was already moving on. Emily picked it up. The warmth seeped into her palms. She pushed through the swinging door and returned to the dining room. Nothing had changed. The soft hum of expensive conversation continued. The light remained perfect. Controlled. Except her. She crossed the floor, steps measured, and placed the plate in front of him with precision. Your salmon. Richard glanced at the dish. Then at her. Something shifted. Not recognition. Curiosity. You didn't write down my order. I didn't need to. He cut into the fish with surgical precision. Took a bite. Chewed slowly. Emily stood still, hands loosely clasped, waiting. It's good, he said at last. Better than last time. I'm glad. But she didn't move. He noticed. Was there something else? Polite. Edged. A pause. Calculated. You come here often, Emily said. Not a question. Richard set his knife down carefully. Now he was paying attention. I do, he said. Why? Just observing. A beat. You seem comfortable. The air tightened. He leaned back, studying her the way he studied contracts. People trying to hide something. That's an interesting observation, he said, for someone who's been here 3 months. I notice things. Clearly. A faint smile. Do you notice all your customers? Or just the ones who complain about overcooked fish? There it was. The test. She didn't retreat. Didn't apologize. Only the ones who expect the world to rearrange itself when they walk in. Silence. Sharp. Uncomfortable. Something flickered behind his eyes. Bold, he said quietly. Do you always speak this freely to customers? No. Then why me? She let the silence sit. Let him feel it, because you remind me of someone. His fork paused midair. Who? She held his gaze one beat too long. Someone who believed power meant never having to see the people it touched. The word settled. Richard placed the fork down slowly. His jaw tightened, just slightly. What's your name? Lower now. Careful. Emily. Last name. A faint smile. Carefully empty. Carter. He searched her face for recognition, found nothing, because she'd learned how to hide everything that mattered. Well, Emily Carter, he said at last, I prefer my meals without commentary. Of course. She stepped back. Enjoy your salmon. She walked away, her posture perfect, her expression unchanged, her pulse steady, her hands didn't shake, and for the first time in 4 years she felt something she thought she'd lost: control. Breathe, because this is only the beginning. Subscribe now, and stay until the end. Emily stood near the kitchen door, back to the wall, eyes tracking the dining room with a level of awareness most people never develop. She wasn't watching Richard directly. That would be obvious. Instead, she monitored him peripherally. The way he moved, the rhythm of his eating, the moments his attention drifted, toward the door, toward other tables, toward his phone. She catalogued everything, while appearing to catalog nothing. Old habits. The kind that don't fade just because you stop wearing the uniform. Across the room, Richard ate in silence. His posture remained relaxed. But something had shifted. He looked up more often now. His gaze swept the room with a frequency that suggested distraction, or something closer to unease. Good. She hadn't meant to unsettle him. Or maybe she had. It was hard to tell anymore where instinct ended and intention began. A hand touched her shoulder. Emily turned immediately, her body already coiled, and found the manager standing too close. What did you say to him? His voice was low. Careful. I took his order. I brought his food. He asked about you. Emily's expression didn't change. What did he ask? How long you've been here? Whether you've worked hospitality before? Whether you have complaints? The manager studied her. He seemed bothered. I was polite. That's not what I asked. Emily met his gaze calmly. I did my job. If he's bothered, that isn't something I can control. The manager hesitated, weighed the risk, then stepped back. Just keep it professional. He's important. Understood. As he walked away, the familiar weight settled over her again. In places like this, important meant untouchable. Money bought silence. Power erased questions before they were asked. She had lived in that world once. She knew how it worked. She also knew how it broke. 20 minutes later, Richard signaled for the check. Emily approached, receipt in hand, and placed it beside his empty plate. He didn't look at it. He looked at her. You're very controlled, he said. Emily paused. Excuse me. Your movements. Your tone. Your face. He leaned back, studying her openly now. The kind of attention that dissected. Most people in your position perform, he continued. They smile more. Apologize for things that aren't their fault. And I don't. Emily asked. No. A beat. You don't. Which makes me wonder why. She felt the pull, the subtle pressure toward explanation. A technique she recognized instantly. Create discomfort. Wait. Let silence do the work. But she'd been trained by people better than him. Maybe I don't see the point, she said. The point of what? Performing for people who won't remember my name tomorrow. Richard's eyes sharpened. You think I won't remember you? Emily held his gaze. Soft. Deliberate. I think you've already forgotten more important people than me. The words landed heavily between them. Richard's jaw tightened, just slightly. He reached for his wallet, pulled out a black card, placed it on the receipt with precision. Run it. Emily picked it up without looking and walked toward the register. Her heartbeat steady, her breathing even. But beneath the surface, something darker stirred. She'd pushed too far. Or maybe not far enough. It was hard to know which would be worse. When she returned, Richard was standing, coat over one arm, phone in his hand. He signed without looking at the total, then glanced up. Emily Carter, he said slowly. I'll remember that. It should have sounded like a compliment. It didn't. It sounded like a threat. Have a good afternoon, Mr. Hale, Emily replied calmly. He paused. You know who I am. Everyone here does. Not quite true. She didn't know him the way the staff did. She knew him as a signature, as a voice in a meeting she'd never attended, as the reason she'd learned how to disappear. Richard studied her one last time, then nodded and turned toward the door. Emily watched him leave, his silhouette framed by the afternoon light. Before it vanished into the street. Only then did she release a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The dining room resumed around her. Laughter. Conversation. Silverware against porcelain. But something had changed. The air felt thinner. The light felt sharper. And for the first time in 4 years, Emily Carter felt the pull of something she'd sworn she'd left behind. Not revenge. Worse. Recognition. She had spent years disappearing. Now, he was looking. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Motion and silence layered together. Emily moved through the dining room the way she always did. Efficient. Invisible. Forgettable. She took orders. Delivered plates. Refilled glasses. She smiled when required. Nodded when appropriate. Spoke only when spoken to. But her mind was elsewhere. It kept replaying the conversation. Every word. Every pause. Every micro-expression on Richard Hale's face. The way his eyes narrowed when she spoke too freely. The way his jaw tightened when she mentioned forgotten people. The way he'd said her name. I'll remember that. She told herself it didn't matter. He was just a regular customer. Mildly intrigued by a waitress who didn't grovel. By tomorrow, he'd forget the exchange. By next week, he wouldn't recognize her face. That's what she told herself. Her body didn't agree. Her pulse stayed elevated. Her awareness remained sharp. Each time the door opened, her eyes tracked it automatically. Height, build, gait, threat level, old instincts. The kind that kept her alive. When survival meant being faster, smarter, more prepared than everyone else in the room. Instincts she'd tried to bury. By 6 o'clock, the dinner rush arrived. The restaurant filled with voices and laughter. The warm hum of people who never questioned whether they belonged in places like this. The kitchen moved faster. Orders stacked up. The manager's voice tightened. Emily worked through it mechanically. Movements precise. Face neutral. She was refilling wine at table 12. When she heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Subtle. A disturbance in the rhythm of the room. Her spine straightened. Her attention snapped toward the entrance. 3 men had walked in. They weren't dressed for dinner. Dark jackets. Hands in pockets. Eyes moving too quickly. Emily set the bottle down carefully and stepped back toward the wall. Distances, exits, sight lines. The host approached them with a practiced smile. "Good evening, gentlemen. Do you have a reservation?" The man in front didn't answer right away. Tall, broad-shouldered, a scar along his jaw. He looked past the host, into the dining room. "We're meeting someone." "Of course. May I have the name?" "We'll find them ourselves." The host hesitated. "I'm sorry, sir, but—" The man moved past him. The other two followed, and the atmosphere shifted. Not loudly, not obviously, but unmistakably. Predators entering controlled space. The diners hadn't noticed yet. They were still eating, still talking, but the staff had. Emily saw it in the manager's shoulders, in a waiter's hand drifting toward his pocket. Her breathing slowed. Her mind accelerated. She tracked the three men as they moved deeper into the room. Their spacing, their timing, their coordination. Professional, not random. One of them stopped near the center of the dining room and turned, his gaze fixed on a table near the window. Emily followed it and felt her stomach drop. Richard Hale, back at table 7, mid-conversation with two men in expensive suits, papers spread between them. A business meeting. He had no idea what was about to happen. Emily did. She'd seen this pattern before. Different cities, different names. The approach, the positioning, the calm before impact. Her hands didn't shake. Her pulse didn't spike. Everything went quiet, dangerously quiet. The lead man moved toward Richard's table. His hand shifted inside his jacket. Emily moved. Not fast, not obvious. She simply changed direction, stepped into the narrow space between them. Tray held at chest height. "Excuse me," she said politely. "Careful with the—" She let the tray slip. It hit the floor with a sharp, metallic crash. Every conversation stopped. Heads turned. One crystalline second of silence, including the three men. Emily dropped into a crouch immediately, apologizing, flustered, harmless. But her eyes were locked on the lead man's hand. It froze halfway inside his jacket. In that moment of hesitation, that broken momentum, Richard looked up, saw the men, and his expression changed. Not fear, recognition. He knew what this was. The lead man assessed the room, the eyes watching, the attention drawn. Too many witnesses, too much risk. He withdrew his hand. Empty. Turned away. The three men walked toward the exit in silence. Controlled, but rushed. The door closed behind them, and the room exhaled. Conversations resumed. Quieter now. Uneasy. The manager rushed to Emily, asking if she was all right. She smiled. Said she was fine. Just clumsy. But across the room, Richard Hale sat perfectly still. His papers forgotten. His eyes locked on her. Not with gratitude. With suspicion. Because someone who'd worked hospitality for 3 months didn't move like that, didn't read a room like that, didn't drop a tray at exactly the right second. Emily stood slowly, met his gaze for one brief moment, then turned toward the kitchen, her heartbeat finally climbing, her hands still steady. He had been looking at her before. Now, he was seeing something else entirely. Emily pushed through the kitchen door and kept walking. Past the line cooks shouting orders. Past the steam rising from the dishwasher. Past the manager calling her name. She didn't stop until she reached the back hallway. Narrow, fluorescent lit, cooler. Only then did she breathe. Her hands pressed flat against the cold tile wall. Her eyes closed. Slow inhale. Controlled exhale. Her body had flooded itself with adrenaline, the kind she could not afford to release. She'd broken cover. Not completely. Not obviously. But enough. Enough that someone trained to see patterns would start asking questions. A man like Richard Hale. A man who made his living reading people, identifying threats, eliminating variables. A waitress doesn't move like that. A waitress doesn't position herself like that. A waitress doesn't disrupt a coordinated approach with split-second timing. Stupid. Her jaw tightened. 4 years of discipline. 4 years of erasing instincts. 4 years of learning how to be forgettable. And she'd risked it all to stop something that might not have even been meant for him. Except it was. She'd seen it in his eyes. Not fear. Recognition. He'd known exactly what those men were. Which meant he'd been expecting them. Or something like them. Carter. The manager's voice cut down the hallway. Emily opened her eyes. Smoothed her expression. Turned. He looked shaken. "I ask you." Hands restless. "What the hell just happened out there?" "I dropped a tray. Those men left. Before they..." He stopped. Studied her. "Did you see something?" "I was clumsy." He didn't believe her. But he didn't know what else to believe. "Mr. Hale wants to speak with you." She already knew. Now. Richard had moved to a private table. Away from the windows. Away from witnesses. He sat alone. A glass of whiskey in front of him. Untouched. Emily approached. He let the silence stretch. Then gestured to the chair. "Sit." It wasn't a request. "I'm working." "Not anymore." She hesitated, just long enough to show choice. Then sat. Richard studied her. "You dropped that tray on purpose." "It slipped." "No." "Calm." "Certain." "It didn't." Silence. "You saw them," he continued. "You read them. And you put yourself between us." "I didn't know they were looking for you." "Yes, you did." Her mind raced. Calculating. Measuring. "Why would I do that?" she asked. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." His voice lowered. "Someone who works here 3 months doesn't move like you did. Doesn't read a room like that. Doesn't act unless they've been trained." The air thinned. "So tell me," he said quietly. "Who are you?" "That's the wrong question." His jaw tightened. "What's the right one?" "Why those men were here for you." Silence. Absolute. Something flickered across his face. Not suspicion. Wariness. "If you saw something," he said, measured, "you should talk to the police." "Will you?" He didn't answer. Because they both knew he wouldn't. "I should get back to work," Emily said. "Sit." Harder now. "You're not leaving until you tell me who trained you." She leaned forward slightly. "I work in a restaurant." "You work in a restaurant now," he whispered. "But not before." Then she leaned in. Closed the distance. Voice low. Controlled. Sharp. "I'm the person who just saved your life," she said. "And you still don't recognize me." Richard froze. Searching memory. Files. Faces. Finding nothing. Because when he'd erased her, he'd never bothered to look. Emily stood. "Enjoy your whiskey, Mr. Hale." She walked away, leaving him alone with the truth. The greatest threat in the room had never been the men at the door. It had been the woman holding the tray. He'd asked who she was. But the real question was what he'd done to her. Emily didn't go back to the dining room. She walked straight to the staff locker room, pulled her bag from the narrow metal cabinet, and left through the back exit, without clocking out, without explaining, without looking back. The alley behind the restaurant was dim and cool. The air carried the scent of rain that hadn't fallen yet. She moved quickly, her steps silent against the damp pavement, her mind already sliding into protocols she had sworn she would never need again. Assess. Relocate. Disappear. She had done it before. She could do it again. Except this time, it felt different. This time, she had surfaced, she had spoken. She had acted. She had let him see enough to start asking questions, the kind that led to searches, to phone calls, to files that were supposed to remain sealed. Stupid. Reckless. She turned onto a busier street and forced her pace to slow. Blending into the evening crowd, her breathing steadied. Her posture softened. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it buzzed again. Then, again. When she finally checked, there were 3 missed calls from the restaurant, 2 messages from the manager. Where are you? Mr. Hale is asking for you. Emily deleted them without responding, and powered the phone off. Whatever Richard Hale wanted, she couldn't give him. Not answers. Not explanations. Not the satisfaction of realizing that the woman he'd erased with a signature had just saved his life. She kept walking, already calculating the familiar steps, a new city, a new name, another identity built carefully enough to survive scrutiny, until she could disappear again. But something resisted. 4 years of running. 4 years of silence. 4 years of swallowing the truth because survival demanded invisibility. And tonight, for the first time since it all collapsed, she felt something else. Not from him. From herself. She felt seen. Across the city, high above streets washed in reflected light. Richard Hale stood behind a glass desk in his penthouse office, phone pressed to his ear. I need everything, he said quietly. Employment records. Background. Prior addresses. Any previous names. A pause. Yesterday, he added, jaw tightening. I want answers by morning. He ended the call and stared out at the city, without seeing it. His mind replayed the moment, again and again. The tray. The timing. The disruption. And her words, low, controlled, precise. I'm the person who just saved your life. It wasn't possible. Richard Hale didn't forget people. His entire career had been built on memory, faces, names, leverage. He cataloged threats the way others cataloged investments. And yet, her face was absent, a void, where recognition should have been. His phone lit up. Initial search complete. No records prior to 3 months. Name appears fabricated. Fabricated, which meant she had calculated everything. Which meant she had known exactly who he was from the moment she approached his table. The question was why. Emily sat on a bench in a small park 6 blocks away, her bag beside her, rain beginning to fall in soft, intermittent taps through the leaves above. She should move. She didn't. Instead, memory surfaced, the debriefing room. The harsh lights. The voices that didn't ask questions, so much as deliver conclusions. You exceeded your authority. You created a liability. She had tried to explain. Tried to make them understand that her decision had saved lives. It hadn't mattered. The report had already been written. The recommendation already signed. Richard Hale. She had never seen his face. Never met him. He had existed only as a name at the bottom of a page. The final approval that erased her career, her identity, her existence. Until tonight, something had shifted. Not anger. Clarity. She had spent 4 years running from a ghost, and tonight, the ghost had complained about the temperature of his water. Emily stood slowly, and shouldered her bag. This time, she wasn't running to by midnight. A thin file sat on Richard Hale's desk. Alias. No prior history. Professional erasure. He opened his private archive and began scrolling through years of sealed records. Names. Faces. Summaries. One of them was hers. He just hadn't known it. Rain streaked down the glass behind him. For the first time in his career, Richard Hale felt something unfamiliar. Uneased, he had made people disappear. He just never imagined one would come back. If you're still here, this isn't just a story anymore. Subscribe, because from here on, nothing stays buried. Morning came too quickly. Emily woke in a cheap hotel room on the edge of the city. The kind that didn't ask for ID if you paid cash. Where the walls were thin, and nobody cared who you were, or why you were there. She barely slept. Every sound in the hallway had pulled her awake. Footsteps of voices, doors closing. Her body stayed coiled, alert, running on protocols she couldn't fully shut down. She sat up slowly, and stared at the phone she'd turned back on an hour earlier. 17 missed calls. 9 voicemails. 12 messages. She deleted them all. Without listening. Without reading. Whatever they wanted. It didn't matter anymore. She wasn't running this time. By 10 a.m., Emily stood across the street from a building she'd promised herself she would never approach again. Gray concrete. Mirrored windows. No visible signage. A place that existed in plain sight, and stayed invisible to anyone who didn't know what to look for. She watched the entrance for 20 minutes, cataloging faces, noting patterns. Then she crossed the street, and walked through the revolving door, with the calm confidence of someone who belonged. "I'm here to see Marcus Chen," she said. "No appointment," she added quietly. "Tell him Elena Carter is here. He'll see me." Her real name hung in the air, the one she hadn't spoken aloud in 4 years. Minutes later, the tone changed. "10th floor," the guard said. "Someone will meet you." Marcus Chen looked older, gray at his temples, lines around his eyes, but his gaze was still sharp. When Emily stepped into his office, "You're supposed to be gone," he said. "I was." "Then why are you here?" "I need information." "You don't exist anymore," Marcus replied flatly. "You were terminated, erased." "I know." Her voice didn't waver. "But you were there. You know the report was edited." Silence. "I need the name of the consultant who approved my termination." "Why?" "Because I've been serving him dinner." Marcus went very still. "Richard Hale," Emily said. "That's the name, isn't it?" Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. "He looked right at me," Emily continued quietly, "and saw nothing. Just a waitress." "That was the point," Marcus said. "Total erasure. You were never meant to surface." "I didn't," she replied. "He walked into my restaurant." Marcus turned away. "You need to leave. Tonight. I can get you new documents." "Before what?" Emily's voice sharpened. "Before he finds out the woman he erased is still alive? Before he has you killed." Emily didn't move. What she wanted wasn't revenge. It was smaller, and far more devastating. Recognition. "I'm not running again," she said. Marcus exhaled slowly. "Then you're making a mistake." "Maybe," Emily replied. "But it's mine." She paused at the door. "He signed my death warrant without knowing my name. The least I can do is make sure he learns it." Then she left. Richard couldn't focus on his morning meetings. Her voice kept replaying in his head. "I'm the person who just saved your life." By noon, he locked himself in his office. The file was thin. Too thin. Emily Carter. No records prior to 4 years, 2 months ago. Pattern consistent with professional erasure. 4 years. 2 months. He filtered his archive by date. 7 files appeared. The third one stopped him cold. Carter, Elena Marie. Termination approved by Richard Hale. The photograph stared back at him. The same eyes. The same face. Not a waitress. Elena Carter. His phone vibrated. You wanted to know who I am. Now you do. What are you going to do about it? For the first time in his career, Richard Hale was behind, and the woman he'd erased was the one setting the terms. Richard didn't respond to the text. He sat in his office for a long time, staring at Elena's file on the screen, at the photograph, a face he had approved for erasure. Without a second thought, a decision made in less time than it took to finish his coffee. He remembered the case now, vaguely. Operation Silver Lake. An operative who acted outside parameters. The report had been clear. Liability, risk, incompatible with operational requirements. He had signed the termination because that was his job. Make the difficult calls. Remove the variables. He had never asked what happened to the people afterward. Until now. Richard stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city, without really seeing it. His phone rang. Marcus Chen. He answered calmly. I was wondering when you'd call. You found her, Marcus said. She found me first. A pause. She was here this morning. Richard's jaw tightened. What does she want? I don't know, Marcus replied. But she's not running. And she's not hiding. Silence. That means whatever she's planning. Marcus added. It's already in motion. Richard looked away from the window. She texted me, he said quietly. Said I know who she is now. Do you remember her? Richard didn't answer. Because the truth was, he didn't. He remembered a file. A problem. A solution. Not the woman whose life. He ended with a signature. She saved my life, Richard said. 3 men came for me. She stopped them. Marcus went quiet. If she wanted revenge, Richard continued, she could have let them finish it. Maybe she wants something worse. Marcus said, what? For you to understand what you did. The line went dead. Richard stood alone. He opened Elena's file again. This time, he read every line, every cold phrase, every reduction of a human life into bureaucratic language. At the bottom, his signature, Richard Hale, external consultant, authorization, full erasure protocol. He stared at it. Then he made a call. Emily sat in a quiet coffee shop, hands resting on the table, waiting. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. We need to talk. In person. Name the place. She paused, then typed slowly. Meridian. Tonight. 8 p.m. Same table. She closed the laptop. That night, the restaurant filled quietly. Emily arrived early. Simple clothes. Hair pulled back. She didn't look like a waitress. She didn't look like an operative. She looked like someone who no longer needed a disguise. She sat at table 7, ordered water, still, room temperature, and waited. At exactly 8, Richard Hale walked in. Their eyes met. He crossed the room and sat across from her. The silence was heavy. Elena, he said. She nodded. I read your file, he continued. All of it. And, she asked, you saved 12 people. I did. The report didn't say that. No, she replied. It didn't. I didn't know, Richard said. Would it have mattered? Silence. I don't know, he admitted. She leaned forward. You erased me, without ever seeing my face. I'm sorry, he said. Are you? Yes. Because you understand now? Or because I'm sitting here? Richard didn't answer. I didn't save your life for you, Emily said calmly. I saved it because I couldn't watch people die. She stood. The men who came for you will come back. And next time, she added softly, I won't be there. She turned to leave. Wait. She paused. What do you want from me? Richard asked. Emily looked back. I wanted you to know my name. That's all. She walked away, leaving him alone. She gave him what he never gave her, the courtesy of being seen before being erased. Emily didn't go home. She walked through the city for hours, letting the night air cool the weight that had built inside her chest. The streets were quieter now, crowds thinning, evening turning into night. She had done what she came to do. He knew her name now, knew her face, knew what his signature had cost. It should have felt like closure. It didn't, because nothing had truly changed. Richard Hale would return to his office, back to his files, back to making decisions that erased people, without seeing their faces. And she would return to the margins, to being no one, to carrying a past that never fully let go. The only difference was this. Now, he would remember, at least for a while. Emily stopped at a small park, and sat down slowly, her bag resting beside her. One moment of stillness. One moment to feel the weight of 4 years pressing down. One moment to acknowledge the truth. She had survived something designed to destroy her. Not intact, not unbroken, but alive. Her phone buzzed. She almost didn't look. Unknown number. The men who came for me. I know who sent them. I know why. And I know they're coming back. Emily didn't move. If you're willing to help me stop them, I'm willing to give you something in return. Another message followed. Your name, your file, your entire record, unsealed, corrected. She read it again. I never asked what happened to you. I'm asking now. And if you'll let me, I want to fix it. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She could delete it, disappear again, choose safety, or she could choose something else. Not because someone ordered her, not because protocol demanded it, but because she wanted to. She typed slowly. Same restaurant. Tomorrow, noon. Come alone. She hit send, and stood. Not running. Not hiding. Deciding. The next day, Richard arrived early. He sat at table 7, the same table where this had begun. He hadn't slept. He'd spent the night uncovering everything. The men who tried to kill him. The deal that triggered it. The people who wanted him erased. He couldn't handle this alone. He needed someone who saw threats before they formed. Someone who moved before fear arrived. He needed Elena Carter. Not the file. Not the liability. The person. At exactly noon, she walked in. Calmer now. Centered. Like someone who had made peace with a decision. She sat without greeting. Tell me about the men, she said. They work for Victor Kane, Richard replied. A competitor. He wants me removed before a merger next month. She listened. 2 nights ago was an execution attempt. He continued. It won't be the last. You want me to stop him, she said. I want us to stop him. And in exchange, your record, cleared, corrected, publicly. Elena was silent. I don't want my career back, she said finally. I don't want that life. Richard waited. But I want my name back, she continued. I want the truth recorded. I want those 12 people to matter. She met his eyes. And I want you to understand something. Power without accountability is just violence in a suit. I understand now, Richard said. She studied him, not looking for redemption, looking for recognition. One condition, she said. Name it. You don't decide people's lives without knowing their names, without seeing their faces. Agreed. She extended her hand. He took it. They shook once. When do we start? She asked. Tonight. 3 weeks later, Victor Kane was arrested. The evidence was overwhelming. The threats stopped. The merger collapsed. Richard stood in his office, holding a single document. Official review, Operation Silver Lake. Finding, prior termination based on incomplete information. Record status, cleared. He read it 3 times, and sent it. Emily opened the envelope in her apartment. Her name, her record, her truth, visible. She sent one message. Thank you. The response came immediately. No, thank you for reminding me that every signature has a name attached to it. Emily stood at the window, watching the city. She wasn't Elena Carter anymore. And she wasn't just Emily Carter either. She was something in between. Someone who had been erased, who had survived, who had chosen to be seen, not for revenge, but for recognition. She breathed in slowly, and smiled. He had learned to see the faces behind the files, and she had learned that survival could become something more than staying invisible. If you made it this far, you already understand what this story was really about. It was never just about a billionaire and a waitress. It was about the people we erase without ever seeing them, the decisions we make without knowing the faces behind them, the power we use without understanding the cost. Elena Carter lost everything because she chose 12 lives over a signature on a piece of paper, and 4 years later, she saved the life of the man who erased her, not because he deserved it, but because she couldn't live with herself. If she didn't, that's the difference between power and strength. Power decides who disappears. Strength decides who survives. If this story moved you, subscribe now. Become part of this channel. Leave a like. Turn on notifications. Because stories like this, stories that ask hard questions and refuse easy answers, need to be told. And if you've ever felt invisible, erased, or dismissed, remember Elena's name. She refused to stay buried, and so can you. I'll see you in the next story.